Remember that the front of the church, clear out to the sidewalk, was all bricked.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and I mean, there was no grass or anything. That was all brick.
Okay.
Clear out to the sidewalk. And the church itself, inside, I can remember the aisles, and they rented pews at that time. You paid pew rent.
Okay.
If you had the means to do it. And then you got your name on a plaque, and it was fastened to the church pew.
Okay.
Under isinglass.
It's like reserved seating.
Yeah, and anyway, I can remember going to church, and if you happened to get into one of those pews that was rented to somebody else and had their name on it, and they come along later on to go to Mass, you had to move. I mean, because that was theirs.
Wow.
You found a place, where there wasn't. So
okay.
I can remember that.
Well, that's interesting.
And it was beautiful inside. I always thought it was. I was just a kid at that time, and the statues were really pretty. And I mean, it was sad to see them go.
Yeah. Do you happen to know what happened to a lot of those statues? Did they give them away?
The only one I know of was the one of St. Agnes, and the St. Agnes nuns got that. They had that over in their house.
Oh, okay, next door.
So I don't know what happened to the other ones. No.
Okay. Okay. Do you remember anything about the windows or the decorations inside the old brick church?
On church? Well, the main altar, there was always flowers on it, and candles, and then the two side altars, they did use them for masses a lot of times because we had extra priests here. We had either one or two assistants, and there were occasions in the church year where they could say 3 masses
at the same time.
At the same time,
wow.
When I mean they following each other, like Christmas. I can remember Christmas Eve. You went to Mass and you really stayed for 3 of them. They were all low masses, but that was one right after the other.
Wow.
And they also used the side altars for masses. Yeah. In 1948, they closed the old church and moved over to the auditorium, and we had Mass over there for probably about 4 years, I think. We used the auditorium for church while they tore down the old one and rebuilt and built the new one. So it was a matter, I think, of about 4 years. And that started in 1948. I think they closed the old church.
Okay.
Yeah.
I heard it was a hazard, a building hazard. It was condemned or something. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. A lot of sadness when that closed.
What?
A lot of sadness when that closed, the old one.
Oh yes, it really was. I mean, it was. To us, it still was the church that we knew. Yeah, yeah. But it was time to go, I guess.
Yeah.
It was when we played ball, it was right on the north side. And there was only a driveway between the trees and the church. And every once in a while we hit the church with the ball. But I mean, they had their windows all screened over. I mean, you never broke any windows.
Okay, was that, I saw on old pictures of the old brick church, were those screens that were over on the outside?
Yeah, that's why they were there.
Okay.
Because they played ball there all the time on that side.
Okay. Okay. Do you know if the windows, were they like real stained glass, or is it kind of one of those pasty film things that went over them?
Oh, they were, I don't know what you call stained glass, but I know they were all just small pieces and all leaded in.
Oh, okay.
I guess you'd call that stained glass.
Yeah. Okay. It just seems like from some of the pictures, it seems like it was like a piece of regular glass and it had like a colorful film over it. It's kind of what it looked like to me. But I mean, I could be wrong.
I don't think they ever had anything over them glass to protect them.
Okay.
Because some of them were broke.
Oh.
Yeah, I mean, there'd be a little piece like that.
Mm-hmm.
At least as I remember it that way.
Okay.
Because there was something wrong with them. And at the bottom they had a, well, if you've seen the picture, why they had an insert in the bottom of something. My dad helped dig the original pond that was out there.
Okay. Oh, wow.
And that was, I don't know the priest that was here though at that time when that was built.
Monsignor Julius Simons, I believe?
Oh, it'd have to be the first ones, Julius Simons, yeah.
Yeah, because
it has to be him or earlier.
If it was before him, I think it was Reverend Theodore Wilkin.
Yeah, I heard Dad talk about that.
Father Wilkin died in 1913. So Julius Simons was from 1913 to 1932.
Well then, yeah, then it had to be the Father Simons.
Okay.
The first Father Simons. Skis and go off with a chute.
Oh, okay.
We'd go down steps that way.
Oh, wow.
That's the reason we do it only when there's nobody there. Because
wow.
once you start, there's no stopping.
Right. Wow.
There was only about 2 or 3 of us to do it.
One you knew the most was Father Monsignor Simon Schmidt.
Schmidt, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that because he was pastor when I did the work on the altar and
Okay.
built the podium.
Okay. I do know Monsignor J.J. Simons was very strict.
The first one.
The second one.
Oh, the second one.
He was very loud and very strict.
Oh yeah, he was. Oh yeah, yeah. He. When he first come, the singing was, you know, real slow,
Mm-hmm.
and he wanted it faster. And well, Sister Patricia was here at the time, and apparently it was unbeknownst to her what he was going to do. And she was playing the organ up there like she usually does, and it was too slow for her. So he started singing, and he went over the organ to everybody.
Wow.
And I mean, after that we sang faster.
How? I was told he did not need a microphone.
Oh no,
Wow.
because I mean, like, well, 40 hours, why, if the priests were here, he'd go over all the priests even.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Even the bishop, I bet.
Oh, well, yeah, the bishop, I don't remember his voice.
Okay.
But I mean, they'd be 10, 15 priests here
Wow.
for 40 hours closing. And he'd go right over the top of all that.
Oh, wow.
Oh yes, I remember that. We'd say our rosary or anything else because we
don't understand them.
Yeah. Then they'd ring the bells and...
Well, look up. What was it like, in your opinion, the Latin Mass? Was it very reverent?
No, it could have been more reverent,
Okay.
I thought. I think we have it more reverent today.
Okay. But since because people couldn't understand what they were saying, it was probably real hard to pay attention.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
We used to say the rosary. Father Julius came out in the country, and he would go hunting with my dad.
Okay. Okay.
And then my mother would say, well, you can stay for dinner, but I only have fried potatoes or something.
And I'm sure he liked him.
Yep, and he was really, really nice.
Nice man.
Oh, he was so nice. And he'd go with my dad hunting. But he was a nice old gentleman.
He was.
He was just so nice. My mother didn't have any fears of setting the table or nothing, because he was so nice.
The old brick church? Oh my goodness. Let's see. There's 3 doors, 2 at the side, and the front doors, and steps up there. We played on the out front there all the time. That was our playground.
Okay.
Well, there was one, the boys were always on the side there. There was a stone playground. There's several trees in there. And I remember all the beautiful statues in there, and it was a beautiful church.
From what the pictures I've seen, it was.
Yeah, and I was thinking of some of those pictures that they have in the, well, I guess they're downstairs. In
the basement?
What?
In the basement?
Yeah, and that would be from the school, though. Those old, I love those big. Well, they were about like that. There was some in each room, and I don't know if you've seen them or remember. Yeah,
yeah.
There's some beautiful ones.
Oh yeah.
And but we had some beautiful statues in that church. I tore it down when we were. I started tearing it down when we were juniors in high school.
Okay.
And so that would have been about 48. Yeah. 47, yeah, 48, and then we had church in the auditorium for a long time. Of course, that's where I was married, in the auditorium in 51. I always loved the statues around. I mean, not the statues particular. I like the statues, yeah, but the stations around there were always so beautiful, and the windows, all of the stained glass windows. Had some beautiful ones, and light coming through there. Yeah, I remember the pews. For a long time, they paid pew rent, had the names on the pews. Yeah, I can remember Mom and Dad's and Grandpa's names on the pews. And everybody went in the same pew then, each week. And anyway, another big thing was always the May crowning. That was a big thing. The whole high school was in the procession, plus the second graders, first communion class.
Okay.
It was always the last Sunday in May. Yeah.
It's okay.
And anyway, 1949, I got to crown the May Queen.
Very nice.
So that was exciting. Well, back then, I guess we knew a little bit of the Latin, but you just learned you sang, answer, when you sang the choir, you'd sing in Latin, answer in Latin, but I don't think we knew too much about what we were saying.
Okay, you're just reading it out of a book.
Yeah,
Okay.
and didn't realize the meaning of everything. So when they changed to English, that was great. We understood more and you could participate easier.
Right.
There was a beautiful, down in there was like a water and different things. I don't remember too much detail because we probably only got out there a couple times a year when we were kids, and never walked around the whole thing like we do now. I love to go out and walk through the cemetery. Find a lot of relatives out there. First 8 grades was on, the first and second grade was on the first floor, and there was a lunchroom, but you brought your own lunch. It was just the country kids that brought their lunch in, and the ones in town all walked home. They all lived closer. I mean, wasn't subdivisions and all, and there was that, and then let's see. Well, then we had 3rd to 8th grade on the 2nd floor, and then high school was on the 3rd floor. And I remember the first Friday breakfast. Everybody went to communion. We always went to church, to confessions before First Friday, and went to communion on First Friday, and then we had a special breakfast down there. We usually had donuts or rolls and milk, juice, and that was real special.
Just for all the kids?
Everybody,
okay.
Yeah, everybody got down there. I imagine we had to take turns because the eating area, dining area there wasn't big enough. We had a big kitchen back there, and because we took home ec and we did our cooking back, learned to cook back there, and yeah, that was really special. The Good Friday breakfasts.
What time was Mass usually on Good Friday, or not Good, on First Fridays? Is it pretty early?
I think Mass was always 7:30 every day of the week, and we went every day.
Right.
It wasn't like now they go twice a week.
I lived right across the street in 2 different locations at different years.
Okay.
But my mother was a Dininger, and that's the yellow house on the south side of Madison Street. And if you go out the front window, you look right over and you see the church.
Okay.
And immediately across the street was a playground with big oak trees on the side of that playground, and the church was immediately behind it.
Okay.
And I can remember all the bricks that were first of all in the church, but the sidewalk up front. When I went to grade school there at St. Joseph, that's where we had a lot of recesses on there. And then immediate behind it, of course, was the old school building, entirely of brick, and there was a brick passageway between the old school and the church that you would walk to get to the St. Joseph School and the sister's house.
Okay.
And of course, I remember on the church because in the very back of church, you get from the outside into the rectory, you'd go up some stairs, about 6 or 8 stairs with on the outside to get in there.
Okay.
Because my brother John and I, living so close, and we had learned to be servers.
Okay.
We used that a lot because when they had visiting clergy, like Father Ambrose Cone would come to the church because he was a native of Decatur, and he was at Goodland, Indiana, and they'd need a server. And they'd call either John and I, because we were right across the street. And we remembered him very well, because after serving, he would give us a dime and several times a quarter.
Wow.
And back in those days,
That was a lot of money.
a lot of money, and we really enjoyed it. The church was big because at that time we were pretty young and impressed by sizes, and there were a lot of pews, all wooden, in 2 side areas. And I also remember the pews were marked, because I even had to ask, why are they marked like that? And I was told, well, because they charge pew rent.
I remember reading something about that.
And the parishioners, according where they wanted to sit, and I suspect if they had more money to donate, they would have pew rent.
Okay.
That I remember, and I can remember going up in the back of church. It was an enclosed flight of stairs. You would go up to the choir loft.
Okay.
And right before you get into the choir loft proper, there was about 10 or 12 sets of pews. And I can remember several times when churches were so crowded that we were, young guys, young boys, parishioners would be sent up there.
Okay.
But it was very impressive, and to this day, even though we have a beautiful church right now, that church with the old marble altar and the beautiful statues was outstanding. And it was always beautiful, and many times I know I and other family members would talk about the missing statues that had been taken out, and they were life-size.
Oh, wow.
And of course today, if you look at most of the statues in our church, they're not individual pieces per se, plaster Paris or whatever. They're part of the motif of the church. They're concrete.
Up at the front.
Up at the front and so on. The side altars have a little different. But it was a great church, and we had a big congregation in those days.
And it was unfortunate it had to be tore down.
Yes, yeah, that was. But of course, what we got today is really outstanding. I was teaching at Decatur Catholic, and at that time, or maybe it was a year or so after, I lived right across the street in a house that was located where the present parking lot is,
Okay.
on the south end of it.
Okay.
It was a duplex, and the church bought it, and I think in about 1952. And the janitor was living on one side,
Okay.
and we were living on the other
Okay.
side. And that was part of, I think I taught there 3 or 4 years before that became part of my compensation. And living there, we would see the church, and I can remember we'd have to go to Mass, and all church activities were in the school, in the gymnasium.
Right.
Or not the gymnasium, the auditorium.
Oh, auditorium, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, that was real close, and it was real exciting to watch it go up, and we marveled at the floor being marble, and we would see the workmen piece by piece putting up the background of the Blessed Virgin Mary.
Okay,
as
the
you came
monstrous, or the,
in.
I can't think of the name of it. The Gold Marys, I call it.
Yeah. But
Mosaic, that's it.
yeah, and I also was part of the group of the Fourth Degree.
Okay.
We were part when the church was, we celebrated it, you know. Yeah. Beautiful church, really outstanding, and still is today. There's not many towns the size of Decatur that's got such a church. I can remember that came pretty early in my career. I think I started in the 3rd or 4th grade that they would offer that. The nuns, God bless them, were the ones that would get the candidates and get us trained, and they would make the assignments, and we would have to study Latin.
Okay.
And I know Sister Winifred, the 7th grade, but we also had a couple other sisters in the lower grades that would get us started. Sister Dominica in the 3rd grade, Sister Clarissa, I think, in the 4th grade, and so on. But they would make us study, and then that we would have to reply when they would give us the beginning of the prayer in Latin. And of course, when we would serve in church, we always had an older server that we would serve with, and he would be rather fluent in Latin, and he would help and get us started, and sometimes when we were stuck, they would give us
Here to help.
And I'm going to digress just a moment, though. And speaking about Latin, some of the summers that I had, I went to Rome City, Sylvan Lake, because my aunt had a cottage on Rome City, Sylvan Lake, and it was located right across the water from Bishop Knowles Island, and he had 2 cottages on there.
Wow.
And my brother John and I were both servers at the time. very young. And my aunt, Mrs. Kilbourne, Bertha Dinger Kilbourne, volunteered to Bishop Knoll, and that goes way back,
Wow.
our services as servers. And the one thing that I remember very well is very early in my career as a server. It was on a Sunday, and the bishop had a number of guests that would have vacations. And one time I was assigned as a solitary server to Archbishop McNicholas of Cincinnati.
Oh, wow.
He was the visitor with Bishop Knoll with some other clergy. And I remember when you talk about Latin prayers, I was down at the bottom of the altar when we started Adium Quila Tificat, Juventutum Meum, and so forth. And as we progressed, you know, I wasn't too fluent because I think I was just a server a short time.
Mm-hmm.
And I sort of stumbled a little bit. And I can remember a little later when he got up to the altar to continue the Mass and said a prayer or two, and I guess my replies weren't too good. He got a prayer book and turned around to me and says, "Here, try this." And I'll never forget that, and I think I did do a better job after that.
Very cool.
But those are things you never forget.
Mm-hmm.
I loved Latin. I still like words in Latin because they're the base root, more or less, for many of our words. And I took 2 years of Latin with Sister Agnes Treese at Decatur Catholic High School, and knowing some of those words like that really helped me in English and so forth. But when the decision was made by the Pope and the hierarchy to go to English, I thought it was the way to go. Even though there's some sadness there, you know.
Mm-hmm.
When you take something, we all resist change so much. You missed it, and it took quite a while to learn and change.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it fit real in, and I think it was pretty widely accepted to this day.
Mm-hmm.
There's just a very small minority of churches that use the Latin words in the celebration of Mass now. I remember more than anything, right offhand, was St. Mary's picnic
Okay.
that they had out at Sunset Park. Sunset Park, people probably don't know the younger generation where that was.
I've never heard of it.
Okay, but it's out on 33, and on the way to Wilshire.
Okay.
But it's only about 2.5, 3 miles out of Decatur. And it was a big pavilion, and there's several acres that there was a creek running through it, and the pavilion was sitting up here with a rather spacious parking lot, and with those acreage and the grounds on the other side of the creek there were activities going on, and people could go out there and eat their lunch, or some of them even carried a lunch. But they set up games. It was first of all get the families to come out and visit with one another and talk to one another. But they had a big meal and certain games, and I'm not real sure, but I think the end result, outside of the friendliness and getting together, was to raise some money.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the games, I know they charged small amounts. And I remember very well that they had a game out there where they had a big blackboard,
Mm-hmm.
and they would take cards from a deck of cards and would place them on that big board, and then they would move a table out here that you would have to stand behind it, probably 10, 12, 15 feet.
Wow.
And they had a set of darts, and you would pay something like a nickel or a dime, and you would get 2 or 3 darts. And they would have up there, if you had a pair, you might win a nickel, or
Okay.
if you
Kind
had
of like
3
dart,
of a kind,
dart
you
poker.
yeah, you might win 15 cents, or if you would invest and get 2 sets of darts, and if you would get possibly, they didn't really go that far, a flush or a straight or something like that, you could win a quarter or 35 cents. And there were many young kids that still had their sense of touch and accuracy. I can remember several times that we were winning, and finally one of the clerks says, "Hey, you guys, why don't you go for a walk in the park? Let someone else." In other words, they're telling us we were winning too much, and they wanted to make something.
Oh, wow.
That I remember, and of course we've always had meetings in the school, you know, getting the family together, and of course, even though this is recent, the last 10, 15 years, these breakfasts that we have,
Mm-hmm.
you can see what kind of a turnout we have, and they have good reason, because it takes a class to Washington
Right.
every year, and so on. I can remember that, of course, when I was a youngster, my family would take us out and show us where their mom and dads were buried, and showed us the monuments, and which later on provided an area for my mother and father to be buried. And I can remember, since there was another side of the family, going back, my mother was a Danginger, but her mother was a Burmer Cap, and those names from way back, but you don't see them or hear them today, except when you take a walk through the cemetery. And I can vaguely remember, and I don't know if this is exactly correct, but I can remember that before the cemetery that we now have was really made or instituted, they had a plot or acre or two in the south part, the southeastern part of Decatur, eastern.
Our committee was talking about that last meeting.
Okay.
We're trying to get some more info on it.
It was off of Mercer Avenue, and it would be then to the east of Mercer Avenue, almost 500 feet away from the back of some of those homes. And today, there are, the last time I was out there was some time ago, there's about 12 to 15 apple trees. And at one time, I can't think of his name at the moment, he was a dentist that lives right along there, owned all that land. And he was very generous. I know he's called me and other members to come out and pick apples. He gave them away, and he gave them to other places, churches and food banks and so forth. But we've talked about it. There was no evidence, of course, of any monuments or so on, because I think that the steps we're taking, that those graves were all moved. Now, this I don't know for sure, but the one thing then, when we got our new cemetery, and it's been changed, but in the very center of the cemetery today, there was a, I won't call it a pond, but it was a water basin that had a small bridge, and there were brick sides, and I think Father Joseph Simons, that would have been the uncle of our Monsignor Simons.
Oh, Julius.
Julius, yeah. And I think he had that put in when they were building the original cemetery. Our high school, even though it was small in size, really had a lot of plays, theater, and it gave the students a chance to live in another world of actors, and they were very selective in the type of plays, because they tried to complement some of the high school teachings and our church teachings in some of those plays. And I can remember that for years they did that. The seniors especially, and the juniors, and the Sisters of St. Agnes, of course, were excellent when it came to music. We had nuns that we called them the music teachers, you know. We never said music man because they were all nuns, women, but they would have and give chances for people to sing and get some of their choir members doing dual jobs. And it was always well attended. And of course, athletically, we had all kind of basketball games, and I would have to say that Decatur Catholic, and incidentally, I have a book right out there on the table that is the history of Decatur Catholic High School from 1921 to 1967. And it shows the women's basketball, the teams, and it shows during the 30s when Decatur Catholic High School in 1930 was the state Catholic basketball champions. And we were, for a small school, we had some outstanding teams, and back in those days, and really up even until the day I graduated, we were not in the Indiana High School Athletic Association, nor did we get into any of those tournaments. We always played the state Catholic tournaments, and we would play teams in Ohio, in Illinois, for example, Joliet, Illinois.
Oh wow, that's really far.
Yeah, and in the early or late 30s, they played teams out of Chicago. And I can remember even when I was high school, we would go to Michigan City, and we went to the academy at St. Joseph College in Rensselaer, Indiana, and we'd play. We would play a Cincinnati school. We'd play Delphus, St. John's, Lima, St. Rose, and St. John, later combined to be Lima Central Catholic. But in the early days, or in the 30s, our high school would play teams that they would run up against when they were invited to the Catholic National Tournament. And they would play some of those schools during their regular seasons, and that was unheard of for a school with about 100 students. And of course, they were very active, our clergy and the nuns, and with some of the outstanding parishioners was coming up. We always had to have fundraisers to keep up the monies necessary to run our school and our church. And that gym, of course, the school was built in 1925, and prior to that, as we talked about, the big old school building between the old church and that, where the janitors later lived, we got that new school, and that gym was outstanding. But the things, as we got older, there were some changes made. Originally, there was theater seats all the way up on the north side of the gym, and we had it was a beautiful wooden floor gym and two nice dressing rooms, and one of the students, whose name escapes me at the moment, I think it was Miller, might have been Marcellus Miller, was a electrician and a student, and they built an outstanding scoreboard, and that scoreboard was hand built, and it had large places to put the numbers, which were run by an electric control board, but underneath it there were places where they would have wooden paper signs, and they would have to get the names of the opposing teams so they could put them up there, and it was fixed so that scoreboard would have little lights then if someone fouled or so forth. And it was a big sign. Somewhere I've got a picture of it.
It's not there anymore, is it?
No, not anymore. But I was, one time, a couple years ago, I was interviewed by the Indianapolis Star because they took a picture and wanted the history of that as one of the older gyms still in use in the state of Indiana.
Wow.
And we had just completed our newer gym. But the thing that I can remember that we were low, and due to the building programs in the city and the sewers and all that, we would get some backup water that would flood our gym floor sometimes. And even though we worked hard with the city and with school officials, when I was coaching and teaching and we were still playing some games early, we were down there repairing some of the floors and painting and so forth. Never liked that, but we had to do it. And of course, I was saying we do have a publication about the school there. And of course, there's a lot of athletic accounts, and I have a book that shows it from 1921 to 1967, all the teams and the people that played, the games they won, the points scored, the historical record of the number of games won over the years, pictures of the teams and so forth. I remember that I had George the Rent. I played 1938 to 42, and I was fortunate to play for 4 years on the team. And George the Rent was a great coach, and he had coached prior and was an alumnus of the school, and was our coach for 2 years. And I can remember Ted Zahner was our coach after that, as a graduate of the University of Illinois, which was quite different coming to a small school, and he was a track star. And I have very fond memories that I was saying. I was there 1948 to 56, and I was a student there from 1930 to 1942, and enjoyed the Sisters of St. Agnes. And I was schooled 12 years by them, and then I taught 8 years with them. We quickly outgrew the gym then because they filled in that side of the gym that had the theater seats to put additional classrooms and a music room where that was. And I had left the school in 56, and Al Lindahl took my place, and Al was a teacher and coach there for 4 years, and that was one of the projects he took on, and he did a great job. And you can see it over there now. of course, there's a lot of stories about victories and so on, about the teams and special players. Joseph Monsignor.
Monsignor, yeah, Simons, which would have been his nephew.
He hired me in
Okay.
1956 or 1948. I had just graduated from St. Joseph College, and he got a hold of my mother, and they contacted me because I was up the Dune State Park on a counseling job, and he said, get a hold of him, he wants to talk to you. So well, I remember one thing very well, and he interviewed me and said that the previous coach has gone back to Huntington, and there'd be a vacancy, and they were interested if I'd be interested. And I told him I had signed a contract already for Ohio, but yes, I was interested, and I would be tickled to death to come back to my alma mater. And he said, well, what are you going to do about that contract? And I said, I'll take care of that. And he says, when you get it done, come back and see me. So I went over into Ohio, and I talked to the superintendent and told him I had a chance and to come to this home school of mine. And he says, well, we'd like to keep you. I'll give you $50 more. And I don't know if we want to tell this, $50 more. And I said, oh, thank you, but no, I want to get back here. So I came back and saw Monsignor. And I said, well, Monsignor, I'm clear. I got that contract taken care of, but I just had to tell him that they offered me $50 more. He hesitated for a minute and says, I'll give you $50 more, but that's it. The thing I remember about him so much is he would hand out the report cards at school, and he was always real friendly when he'd come in, but very businesslike, and he would audit the grade cards, and you had to come up and get it. And if you had a low grade or something, he would say, having problems with this class, or what's wrong there, and so forth. And you would have a chance to explain, and other times he would commend you, and his interest was outstanding. He was so dedicated, but at the same time, I can remember that not only in the school, but when I was a teacher for the years he was here, he also was I think, a chaplain of the Knights of Columbus, and he would come up there and spend a lot of time in the meetings, in the social room, and so forth. But the younger kids, because he would walk quite a bit around the grounds, and most of our priests would take a walk every day and go to the post office because they had a box number there to get the mail, and they would see him, and there he goes, you know, and they didn't know him, but I respected him, and he earned so much respect, but he was still a very friendly man.
Do you remember remember any stories or anything about Monsignor Simon Schmidt, the gentleman who replaced him?
Well, some of this sounds so egotistical, I can't help it, but yes.
Okay.
he was an extremely good friend of our family.
Okay.
He was very well acquainted with my mother because he was of that age group and members of his family, Marcellus Schmidt, and then he had a brother, Father, maybe it was brother Dennis Schmidt.
Oh, Brother Denny?
Brother who?
I think I knew I had a real, no, that was a different name.
No.
Okay,
No,
never mind.
yeah, they were real good friends, and of course, Monsignor Schmidt had a brother, Al Schmidt, that ran the Dodge garage on First Street, there where that vacant lot is, and where Jeanette Loshi has got that building.
Okay.
Right in through there. But he was over in the western part of the state, close to Lafayette, on one of his parishioner assignments, but when he came to Decatur, it was back home. And I had just completed 4 or 5 years in Fort Wayne with GE, and I came back here, and I had several meetings with him because he wanted some information and wanted me to do some things.
Okay.
I served on the parish council with him, and I served on the school board
Okay.
when he was here, and there was just a number of things that he was the chaplain of the KSC, and he would come to the meetings, and he was very, very religious and very friendly, and to our family, he knew us all as a family before as a parishioner.
Okay.
And was very, very, very close to him. The one thing that was tough was during his tenure here, our school was growing. And back in the days, I was working then for GE, back in the days when I was coaching 125 students and so forth, thereabouts, but now we were getting up to about 300. And one of the things we had to do, we have our one building, and we had 12 grades. And they were running out of room, and we were on the parish council. I can remember Bob Laurent and Mrs. Joe Schultz and several others. And we were faced with having to make a decision. Were we able to get in the position of building an addition to our school? What we were going to do? Did we have to cut out some early grades and just keep 7th and 8th, or high school, all those decisions? Could we build? Where would we get the money? So forth. Well, we did talk to the bishop, and the bishop says it's entirely up to you folks, but you can't. We aren't in a position to give you any finances to help you. And you'll have to do it if you want to do it yourself. And after much serious thinking and talking and praying, we came to the conclusion that we would attempt to build on to our school. In fact, they even had talked to a contractor and got a a bid that wasn't, what should I say, binding. It was only a bid to give us an idea. Well, the final conclusion was, where would we get that money? And it had to come from the parishioners. And we would have to get it on a program. So a program was approached with the idea that we would communicate by letter to the parishioners, and that we needed, and the sum I can't remember, X number of dollars. And this boiled down with the number of parishes that the number of parishioners that we had in the parish, that would amount to around $2,500 a family or something like that. But that wouldn't be necessarily for everybody, but that would be the type of program we would have to have. And we wanted to vote yes or no, but if it was yes, you would have to make the pledge at the same time. And for us to know, you would have to sign your ballot. That way we would know. So we did that and had several meetings in the auditorium, and there was some anger, there was some disappointments, there were some people very understanding, accepting, some people that were passing by and weren't that rooted in the parish. Well, some of them were upset on the ballot signing. So when they came in, and incidentally, we got the approval of the bishop to do it that way. And when they came in, it was voted down. And of course that meant that we had to make the decision on the school. And we again contacted the bishop, and we had no help there, as he told us. And so the decision was made then that we would be closing our school at the end of the next year. And that would have been 1967. And this was a sad day for many parishioners, for Monsignor Schmidt, and we people that were on the council.
Right. This was the closing of the high school.
Closing of the high school, and but it had to be done,
Right.
and the people voted that way, and we made arrangements. I talked to the superintendent of the school and informed him way in advance, because we had approximately 250 students. And that may be up or down, because some of them would have been going to Adams Central based on this, because they lived in the county and so forth. Of course, at one time there were 10 county schools. Well, anyhow, it was done, and that building was not built. The city-county building it is now was the school, and they got 1, 2, I think maybe 3 buildings. I'll call them trailers, but they're more like semi-permanent houses, you know, almost RV-like without wheels, and they put out there in the front yards, and that was in 1967. Okay, they were faced with the law in the state of Indiana that shut down, and about the same time we had 10 high schools, and they were shutting them down to have only South Adams, which would take Bern, Geneva, Jefferson, we'll stop there, and then Adams Central would take Kirkland, Monroe, Pleasant Mills, that's 6 I think, and of course Decatur High, Monmouth, Decatur Catholic, that's 9. I missed one somewhere. I said Geneva, Bern, Hartford Township would go there in the Bern. So that was the way it went. And so those were tough days for Monsignor. He handled it as well as he could, and we all had some people angry at us, some didn't. And this, of course, is only an opinion, and I can be 1,000% wrong. As tough as it was, as I look back, under the circumstances, it was probably the best thing. Why? Look at the kids that lost a Catholic school and a Catholic education, and they did. However, steps were taken. Bible school. We have these Sunday morning classes for it, and maybe you teach in some of them, I don't know, and so forth. And so many of our young men and women, when they got into the public schools, started serious relationships, men and women, towards marriage. And we have many men that became Catholic, many women that became Catholic. And you don't see that. The only thing you're thinking about is the lack of Catholic education at that time, and we don't have this sports team, we don't have this, and so forth, and what's it going to do to our taxes, and all that kind of stuff. And it was very, very serious. But looking back, and I was rather close to the situation there, and I also had 3 children that went to that school then, who graduated, and they're all college graduates, and 2 of them are married and have retained their faith and so forth, and the one gal is never married, but under the circumstances it turned out pretty well. And I was very close to the Monsignor Schmidt during that time, and he ended up living in Decatur.
After he retired.
After he retired, yes. And he's always asked me about my mom. How's Frances? You know, and even at her age, she walked a block and a half to school, to church, and so forth. And he always wanted Liz, my daughter, to go to St. Mary's College in South Bend.
My sister went there.
Oh, is that right? Yeah. Well, I tell you all that, and I
Oh, that's okay.
And I mean, you know, that's the way, that was a big part of my life at that time.